Hello Year 6, so today we're looking at partitioning numbers. Now not just any numbers, they're numbers that include a decimal, okay? So on the grid in front of me, I've got my place value set up, okay? Hundreds, tens, units, the decimal point, tenths, hundredths and thousandths, okay? And they're the ones we're going to be using today. Now we're going to start off with a number that has one decimal place in it, okay? So let's say I've got 3.2, okay? Now I want to partition that number, so I'm going to write that back down here, ready for my partitioning, okay? So I want to know what each of these numbers is worth. Now the best way to do it is look at where it is on the place value chart, okay? The 3 is in the units column. That means there's 3 ones. So the 3 stays as 3. Okay. Now, to do the decimal point part, where we're going to partition the 0.2, okay, what we need to do is write the number out without the 3 in it. Okay, so just the number we're looking at. And then what I'm going to do is fill in the gap of the number that I've removed from the original number with a placeholder that is 0. Okay. It doesn't change my 0.2. It doesn't change because I put a 0 in front of it. It stays as 0.2 still. The number hasn't changed. Okay. So when I partition the 2, that is worth 0.2. Okay, we have to write the 0 in there to show where that the decimal point stays there as well. Okay, it's a placeholder, holds the place of the 3. Okay, so let's try another number, number with one decimal point. So let's say we've got 4.6. Okay, let's write it down here, ready for my partitioning. So my 4 is in the units column, which means 4 ones, so they stay as 4 whole numbers. Just stays as 4. Okay, now let's look at that 6. Now remember, we're going to rewrite our number without the 4 in it. So if I do that, my 6 arrives here. However, I've got a gap before my decimal point that I have to fill in. Now, I can't just put any random number in there. I have to fill it with a placeholder, and we always use 0 as a placeholder. So I put my 0 in the units there. So my 6 is worth 0.6. Okay, let's try one more with one decimal point. So let's say we've got 9.3. Okay, let's write it down here, ready for our partitioning. The 9 is in the units column, so it's 9 ones, so it just stays as 9. Okay, then I'm going to look at this number here, the 3. Now remember, we rewrite the number out, but remove the 9. So if I rewrote that number, it would look like that, 0.3. Now, we've got an empty space in that units column that has to be filled in because of the decimal point here. Okay, we have to fill that space in. We can't just use any random number. It has to be a place value number, a placeholder. Okay, and our placeholders are always 0. Okay, so our 3 becomes 0.3 because it's 3/10. Okay, in the tenths column. Right, let's move on now to a number with 2 decimal places. Okay, I'm going to leave the 9.3 up there, but it's going to become 9.36. So now we've got a 9 in the units, 3 in the tenths, and a 6 in the hundredths. Okay, so let's write that out. Now the 9 is the easiest one. It's in the units column, so it's 9 ones, so it just stays as a 9. Okay. we need the other two numbers on their own. So you'll notice I've put 2 decimal points on there to fill in. So let's look at the next number in our number, which is the 3, okay? So we're going to write that 3 out. We're removing the 9 like we did before, and I'm removing the 6, okay? So we've just got the 3 on its own. Now what do I need to put in that units column as a placeholder? Well, it's got to be a 0, okay? Now you're probably thinking, but we also took away a number from here, so we have to fill in that gap. Well, we could write 0.30, but it doesn't change our number at all. That is exactly the same as that, because it's after the decimal point, okay? So the 3 there is 0.3. Now let's do the 6. We're going to put our 6 there, and we've got 2 spaces that are empty, just like before with the units when we put our placeholder 0 in. Okay. Now we've also got a place here after the decimal point. Now we have to put a placeholder in there as well, okay, which would be a 0. Because if we didn't put a placeholder there, our answer would be 0.6, which doesn't work because that's telling me that there's 6/10, and we haven't got 6/10, we've got 6/100, okay? So it has to be 0.06 to keep that 6 in the hundredths column, okay? We fill in the placeholders in the units in the tenths column to make sure that our 6 stays in the hundredths column, okay? Let's try another number. Let's try 4.83. Okay, so the 4, the easy one, is with 4 ones, 4 units. Okay, so that stays the same. Let's look at our 8. So we're going to rewrite our 8 in and not the other 2 numbers. We have to fill in our placeholder in the units column here with a 0, because otherwise we cannot write just 0.8 without the 0 in front of it, okay? That shows us that the 8 is in the tenths column, 0.8. The 8 is still in the tenths column, okay? Let's write our 3 in. We've got 2 gaps there before the 3. With the units, we have to fill it in because it's just before the decimal point, okay? We also have to fill in our tenths column with a placeholder, because otherwise our 3 would not end up in the hundredths column, which is where it is, okay? In the hundredths column. So they have to stay in the column that they were in the original number, which means we have to fill in those gaps, okay? Let's try one more, and then we'll go on to 3 decimal points. 6.91. Okay, so the 6 is the easy one. It stays as 6 because it's in the units column. Let's write our 9 down now. Fill in the gaps with our placeholder 0. Well, we need to fill in that gap there. That 9 is still in the tenths column, so we know we're right. So it's 0.9. Okay, let's pull our 1 down, keeping it in that hundredths column. We have to fill in those gaps with our placeholder 0, and we've got to make sure that our 1 stays in that hundredths column. So we have to fill in the units gap and the tenths gap, okay? So our 1 is worth 0.01, okay? Right, let's move on then. And our last type of question, we'll do 3 examples of this one as well, where we've got 3 numbers after our decimal point. Okay, so you can imagine we're probably going to need 3 decimals because we're going to have to move 3 numbers. Okay, so just like with the other ones, the 7 is in the units column, so the 7 stays as 7. Okay, let's pull our 3 down and fill in the gaps with our placeholders. Now we could fill in the gap like this, but there is no point in putting those zeros on the end because it doesn't make any difference to our number. The 3 is still in the tenths, so it's 0.3. Okay, let's pull our 9 down now. It's in our hundredths column and it's got to stay in that hundredths column, so we're going to have to fill in the units and the tenths column with our placeholder. So the 900ths is the same as 0.09. Okay, and the last one, we're going to pull our 6 down here, and that's in our thousandths column. Okay, so we're going to have to fill in the gaps of our placeholders. So we have to fill in our units, tenths and our hundredths to be able to keep that 6 in the thousands. So let's pop our placeholder in. It's in the units, in the tenths, in the hundredths, and then the 6 stays in the thousandths there. So the number is 0.006. Okay, let's try another one. Let's go for 9.641. We're going to need 3 dots. Let's write our number down here. The 9 is in the units again, so it stays as 9. Okay, let's pull our 6 down. The 6 is in the tenths column, so we only have to fill in our units column, which makes our 6 0.6. Okay, let's pull our 4 down. Let's fill in the gaps to make sure that we keep our 4 in the hundredths. So to be able to keep our 4 in the hundredths, we're going to have to fill in the tenths and the units column. So it's 0.04. And our 1, let's pull it down. It's in the thousandths column. Okay, so we're going to have to fill in our units, tenths and hundredths with our placeholder. And the 1 stays in the thousandths, so it would be 0.001. Okay, let's try one more and then it's your turn to answer your questions. So let's have 9.634. We know the 9 is in that units column again, so it's 9 ones, so the 9 stays as 9. Let's pull our 6 down. Okay, we have to fill in the gaps to make sure that our 6 stays in that tenths column. So the only one we have to fill in is the units. Okay, so that becomes 0.6. Let's pull our 3 down, which is in our hundredths column. We have to fill in the gaps before it to keep it in that hundredths column. So we'll have to fill in the units with a 0 and the tenths with a 0. So that becomes 0.03. Let's pull our 4 down. In the thousandths column, we need to keep that 4 in the thousandths. So we're going to have to fill in the gaps before it. So we need to fill in the units, the tenths, and the hundredths. Okay, so our 4 is worth 0.004. Okay, now remember, you can pause this video, you can rewind it, you can rewatch it, you could even watch it as you're doing one of the questions, so step by step. Okay, good luck and I look forward to seeing your work today.